Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to talk about some of the things that have been said about the death of Heinrich Himmler. A few days ago I uploaded a video relating to the testimony of Otto Ohlendorf on Heinrich Himmler and his the communications that he had with him in May 1945, and this led to all sorts of people talking about the death of Heinrich Himmler and conspiracy theories. Now, the problem with conspiracy theories is that those who sort of spread the conspiracy theories never think what's actually behind it, and what's nearly always behind it is money. So somebody makes up a conspiracy theory and on dodgy evidence or whatever, or makes it up completely, and then others propagate it, and the person who made it up gets a stack of cash. Well, that's how it works. Now, I believe in my videos what you get is the truth. I am a serious researcher, and so that is what I believe, and I go back to original documents. I don't just say, oh, well, there's some bloke in the pub reckons this. I go back to original documents, and then I work forward from there. So, unfortunately, most people want to have conspiracy theories and fairy tales. But anyway, let's now, having said that, let's now go into it. Oh, this video certainly would have been better as a live talk so people could interact more. The problem is at the moment it's not really possible for me because at the moment I'm looking after my mother, and the time things go out, which is 1900 hours in the UK or 2000 hours Central European time, then I can't do it at that time. Right, so Himmler, on the let's start on the 1st of May, he was no longer in Berlin. Indeed, he was under a bit of a cloud. Hitler had sacked him from everything because he had found out about his peace overtures to the Western Allies via Count Bernadotte, information which had been leaked to the press by the British when they, and so it was when Bernadotte had approached them. Incidentally, on that very theme, I'll do another video on how Reich confronted Himmler on this subject, but I'm coming off the point a bit there. So, 1st of May, Himmler was in northern Germany. Now, Admiral Dönitz has been appointed as the new Führer, and he'd set up a government in Flensburg on the Danish border. So, Himmler went up there, and his idea was that he could somehow still be useful. He thought of himself as maybe a negotiator, a sort of guarantor of order, a person who would be really useful in administering a post-Nazi Germany as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. That's how he sort of saw things. But I would have to say this, as daft as this may seem, there were plenty of other people who seemed to believe this in the bunker, that some type of deal with the Western Allies would be possible. However, this clearly was something that the Western Allies weren't taking on. So Himmler turned up in Moorvik, in Flensburg-Moorvik. The government was in a naval school, and so he sort of offered his services. But now, if you read the Speer wrote that he was invited alongside Himmler to a dinner with Dönitz, and I think Dönitz did this not because he believed in Himmler, more to the point. What he wanted to do was he saw him as, out of respect for his rank or former rank. However, he made it quite clear to Himmler that he wasn't going to have any official job in his new government, so he was out, and he was a political pariah. It occurred to me only this morning, why didn't Dönitz have Himmler arrested? And which I don't think anybody's ever asked that. The reason, if any, for that is because there was a lot of other SS people, very senior SS people in there. Indeed, one of the sources we have on Himmler is Rudolf Höss, the commandant from Auschwitz. But there's a lot of senior Obergruppenführers. Indeed, they even had a meeting up there. I'll do that in a different video. And so now Himmler was, according to Höss and others, he was still he seemed in good humour. He seemed to be putting a very brave face on it. And although one must feel that he must have been pretty worried. And now he went into hiding, and he sort of changed into clothing which was like half military, half civilian, no, very rather shabby type appearance, which was all the rage then because there were so many refugees on the road, so everybody looked like that. Now he took the name of Heinrich Himmler. Now I've heard people claim that Heinrich Himmler was, I think the story goes that he was killed in a concentration camp, or he was a guard who died, or something like that. Having said that, I know that people like Peter Longerich and Ian Kershaw looked for Heinrich Himmler and they couldn't find anyone of that name. I think it was just a name that sort of Himmler chose for himself. Now it seems a bit daft that you would take something like HH. Now the name H was actually quite popular. Lots of names of this age group start with H. It has been suggested, for example, Magda Goebbels, or the Goebbels couple really, named all their kids with the H, but Magda Goebbels named her first son Harold after with H, and that was before she knew Hitler. Hitler came along, so it was quite a common thing. But using the first name of his seems not the sort of thing that one would want to do. Now, he put on an eye patch to disguise his appearance, and there are those who said, yes, this really did make him look very different. He also put on he got some forged or rather improvised identity papers. Now, also we know from the interrogation, for example, of Rudolf Höss again, that Rudolf Höss got some false papers, but they couldn't get a hold of his paybook, for example. He was told you have to come back for that later. And so they were unable to supply this. You might have thought that the SS would have thought about this in advance. After all, they did produce some very good forgeries for other things. Maybe they didn't. Maybe I don't know. I can't explain that one. So Himmler, after this, he was traveling around in the region of Schleswig-Holstein and Lower Saxony, and there's actually a really interesting account. He went to somebody's house. And this would be around the 10th of May, and he was on the lawn, and he had to ask to be let in. And so, of course, by this time, Himmler was in a difficult situation. He didn't. He would have been aware of the fact that plenty of Germans didn't think much of him, and plenty more had bent with the wind when the Nazis were in power. But now that they weren't any longer, then they would have been out for him as well. In my video I did on Ernst Lurk and the rest of Odilo Globocnik, for example, there was a scene where there's some British troops, and they see a group of Brandenburgers, and there was Major Headley of the British troops in Austria, and he pulls out his pistol, and the Brandenburger major says to him, hey, what you doing? We're on your side now. And that is the way many of them, I think, would have felt at the time. So there's one person above all, which is Werner Grothmann, who was with Himmler until the end, but he was with others, but his group seems to have got smaller and smaller and smaller, and certainly, so when the SS, the SS had their meeting of the senior, what they're going to do, and they sort of all decided to go off in different areas. Now, because Himmler still believed he had some kind of chance, he was absolutely grasping at straws. He sort of sent a letter to Montgomery. Ohlendorf corrected it. This message was allegedly sent via Jodl. Montgomery writes about it in his own memoirs, and but earlier, Himmler, in the bunker on the 20th of April 1945, he said to Speer about should he, when he meets Eisenhower, should he shake his hand or give a Hitler salute. Now he sort of progressed from, he's not going to meet Eisenhower, so maybe he'll meet Montgomery, because obviously this was in Montgomery's area. So, but I would imagine that by now his morale is pretty low. This was somebody who had lived quite frugally, it needs to be pointed out. He didn't live in the super luxury that Goering had, and he did have a fair bit of cash on him and other things, which ended up being buried in North Germany. I'll come on to that on a different subject. I'll do a longer video on this theme later. So what he actually had on him. Now, his idea was to go to the Harz Mountains, which are in Thuringia, and then to somehow later to make his way somewhere to the Alps, where he thought he could hang out. Now, there is no evidence that he thought he was going to the Alps as part of the Alpine Redoubt, as a place where they'd hang on until the very end. And another thing is that the question of werewolves, that whereas Himmler was one of those who initiated the werewolves, in October 1944, Hochwald, I've done several videos from there, his headquarters near Hitler's in Rastenburg. He believed, he sent out the orders for setting these werewolves up, the Nazi resistance. Not clear if it was his idea or Kaltenbrunner's or Hitler's, but never mind. He'd sent the orders out. So but I don't think he really believed. Indeed, he did send out an order that the werewolves weren't to offer resistance. Probably realised there was no organisation in them whatsoever. But many Nazis were utterly terrified of falling into Soviet hands. So we see this, for example, on Odilo Globoznik, or his sidekick, his companion from the old days, the Gauleiter Rainer, which I have covered in some detail. And so there's this terror that the Soviets would get them, and so therefore he would like to surrender to the British, and maybe he'll be able to hide. How he thinks he was going to actually get away with this, putting on a party uniform of an eye patch and some old clothes, I don't think that would work for very long. But bear in mind that there were masses and masses, millions of people on the road. Just to take an example, Schleswig-Holstein, I think the population of Schleswig-Holstein in 1950, the majority of people living there, or at least a highly significant minority, it wasn't a majority, were people who were refugees. Huge amounts of refugees in this area, huge amounts of people on the road. And so that would make hiding a little bit easier. Now, in his group, there were some who then decided they were going into a town to get their papers stamped, and they didn't turn back. The Himmler was stopped at a British checkpoint. There were two people who actually stopped them, were in fact from the Soviet Union. Gusarev, I've forgotten the second one name. Anyway, it doesn't matter, whatever his name. There was an article in Izvestia in September 1964 where it sort of gives the idea, because these brave Soviet soldiers, because the British were hanging around drinking tea, and they sort of missed the whole thing. But these two Soviets actually pulled him out. He was pulled out because things didn't matter. He was put in a car. He was driven to the local prison. He was left in the cells overnight, and the next day he was taken to interrogation. Now, at this point, there is how he actually revealed himself. There are several stories, and I'll have to do this in a different video, but I find there is cause for suspicion. But the thing is this, is if all the stories were the same, then surely that's more suspicious, and people remember things in different ways. Definitely, though, worth having a look at that one. Now, when he was identified, it's again now here there are various stories. Did he ask and say, well, I'd like to talk to you on an urgent matter? And this would, if that did happen in that way, that he asked to talk to them on an urgent matter, he would wanted to get his message over, his letter over to Field Marshal Montgomery, because at the end of the day, he was the person he thought who would save Germany and the Western Allies from the Bolsheviks. And but the now it must be made absolutely clear that whereas Himmler was one of the most important people that were looking for, there weren't all that many people out looking for war criminals. That's number one. The next thing is in number two is that very few people could speak German. Except the Germans, but very few people in the British Army could speak German. And in the next thing, I'd have to say that very few people had any experience with suicide by cyanide, and they didn't know how to stop people doing that. And we do have the reports. For example, one British officer said he'd give him sandwiches with very thick bread in to see how he would manage to deal with that. And now, also worth pointing out that some cyanide was actually surgically implanted. And to give yet another example, there was even a dentist, a person called Kunz, Helmut Kunz, I think it was Helmut Kunz, but Kunz, in the bunker. He may have even been the person who helped Magda Goebbels kill her children. He was charged with after the war. He was in the bunker from the 23rd of April. So I mean, okay, that was after Himmler, but the fact that surgical implants of cyanide were possible. Now, not only that, you don't require cyanide, you don't require much of it to actually kill yourself with. And the fact that, for example, Goering managed to kill himself by cyanide was probably given to him by one of the prison guards. But anyway, it's when I think that this is that Himmler was a coward. Everybody who knew him said he was a coward. So therefore, death by is the least it's the least brave option at this stage, and it probably was his last chance, because another file was found on him. So obviously also, though, I don't dispute the fact that he might have been beaten to death by people. I mean, Otto, what's his name, Oscar de Levanger was beaten to death, although probably not because he was recognised as being, because they just thought he was an SS officer. So therefore, let's come on to. I'll tell you what, before I make any more conclusions, let's now come on to the files and all the rest of it. I think it is worth pointing out that it was no reason for the British to kill Himmler, because the reasons usually given out is, well, he knew all these secrets. Right. This is typical of a conspiracy, the conspiracist inability to think things through. If he knew all these secrets, right, and they were secret, and everybody else knew that he knew all these secrets, because they must have done, otherwise they wouldn't have killed him. It's bizarre. So how were they secrets if everybody knew them? Anyway, it was definitely in everybody's interest that he was alive, as it was, for example, with Goering. Now, what sources have we got for this? Well, we've got operational reports. We've got operation made at the time. We've got interrogation records. Now, interrogation records were normally written up after the event as a summary. And so that is, I think, that you can't then allow a little bit of leeway on. And we have later memoirs, and it's with the later memoirs that there start to be problems, because you don't always remember everything in the way that it actually happened. Now, Himmler was detained as a suspicious individual, but he wasn't recognized at first, and we've got multiple people saying this. I mean, there's no problem. So this evidence that he was just picked up like that. There was an order that went out looking, but they thought he was somewhere. They thought he was in Schleswig-Holstein. They didn't think he was in Lower Saxony. Of course, it's relatively close to each other. Now, I think Himmler maintained it initially but he voluntarily disclosed who he was, and of course that would be absolutely necessary. Now the thing is like this, I don't really think there's any evidence whatsoever of coercion. There's no contradictory testimony like this at all. I think the evidence that he was treated as should be expected is absolutely credible. Now, as far as the cyanide was concerned, now Himmler was searched multiple times and the cyanide capsule was missed. But as I said earlier, these cyanide capsules were pretty small, designed to be concealed. There's plenty of other people who hid cyanide on them, and there's plenty of people who killed themselves by the use of cyanide, including Hitler and Eva Braun. Or Hitler might have been the cyanide that killed him first, it might have been the gunshot, who knows, if that wasn't indeed the way he killed himself. I honestly don't see anything suspicious there. This is not abnormal. And now next thing is that it says that the British were negligent, that people had them, but how would you expect to react if you had somebody with cyanide in your mouth, in his or her mouth? What would you do if you had to keep them alive? I mean, and bear in mind, you've had a chance to think about it. They didn't really have much of a chance, but they did. According to one of the testimonies, they did talk about it beforehand. What can they do to do this? Now Himmler committed suicide by biting quite rapidly down, and so the medical evidence is absolutely consistent with this. So, okay, if the British killed him, why? What is the point, right? Is there any evidence that he was allowed to commit suicide? No, there isn't. Is there any evidence that Himmler escaped, or it wasn't him, and his body was substituted for somebody else? No, not at all. Is it possible he accidentally poisoned himself? Well, maybe. I mean, I don't know enough about this, but I suppose if you've got a cyanide thing inside you, you can bite on something and, I don't know, by nerves, I suppose that's possible. Now, later recollections often exaggerate the importance of the interrogator, simplified the timelines. For example, we don't know exactly when he was arrested, but we know it was in the morning. And also people are trying to exaggerate their own importance. And so we just keep coming back to the same thing. What was the motive? What's the motive? Any political none, any intellectual none, any legal none. Indeed, the Nuremberg I think the preparations they'd already made some start on at least the notes to actually try him. So overall credibility of everything is I do not see anything I don't see anything suspicious about what actually happened. Now, let's now have a look at these files, because if unreleased files. Now, unlike any conspiracist I know, I actually have used archival documents, and I've used them in various countries. And so there's always the idea that there are some archives which are hidden, but these are said by conspiracists who have made this information up in the first place. So let's have a look at some of the things. Now, as far as if we go to the most records, to a large extent, a lot of records anyway, held in the British, the Public Records Office, which is a queue. You can go there yourself if you don't believe me, and you've got a waiting time. Usually it's around 2 weeks before you get in. And but you can also order things, although I've got to say this, like most things are not really orderable. You got to go there. But anyway, if you know what you're looking for, you can go further. Nothing to stop you doing it if you do not believe me. Right, okay, right. So MI5, MI6 internal assessments on Himmler. Now, some of these have actually been released, and so that's when I'll be doing videos on these things. I'll be quoting them, and yes. So otherwise, they have been released because I'm not going to even. I certainly have no access to secret information, and if I did, I certainly wouldn't be putting it out on the internet. And now, having said that, there are things which have not been released. Now, what's the reason for the non-release? The protection of intelligence methods, precedent of extended closures for intelligence services, and they may not actually be about Himmler. Himmler might be mentioned, but they're about British capabilities. Now, is this just Himmler? No, it isn't. This is normal across the board, and so there's nothing unusual about that. Now, there's the field security section, which the interrogation notes. Now, thing is this again: interrogations were recorded as typed summaries, not full transcripts, as a rule. And any shorthand notes taken to questioning are not publicly catalogued. They sort of got lost, and that is because they weren't archived formally. And there is some apparently which are closed under security retention policies, but then again, this is quite common, and it doesn't actually refer to Himmler himself. Now, in Sweden, there are also the files of his negotiations with Count Bernadotte. So his contacts with Bernadotte are known in outline, and but they haven't been released. And the reasons for this is in full for protection of neutral state diplomatic practices, or indeed for the sensitive regarding humanitarian negotiations. And but that's from the Red Cross. Do they do that for other people? Yes, they do. So, I mean, if you can find evidence that it's only the Himmler file in the Red Cross, I've never used. Sorry, it's not true. I have used Red Cross archives, but I haven't. If you can find evidence that others have all been released except the Himmlers, then you might have caused a suspicion. Now, the biggest single thing I noticed when I did the comment is people saying, yes, but these were Western Allies' internal deliberations on Himmler's peace feelers, and now Allied responses to Himmler's overtures are not fully published. Yes, so that would include things like policy, legal documents, political risk, and this is due to diplomatic confidentiality in post-war alliance politics. Now, why don't they release them now? This is policy. I mean, it's not just this; it's other things as well. One of the things that's been put out, I noticed, again in the comments section, saying that they didn't want the Soviets new. Churchill informed the Soviets. Again, it's in the Public Records Office. Anybody can go and see it. Off the top of my memory, I think it was the 26th or 27th, I think it was, of April. It was just before Hitler found out. Churchill sent a telegram. Actually, come to think of it, it might even have been the Soviets who leaked it to the press. Who knows? But anyway, I don't think it was though. Himmler's private correspondence is missing. Now, lots of their documents were actually stolen, and I have actually talked about this. What happened to his house in Gmund in Bavaria? It was looted, and it's alleged that parts of his diary were actually taken there. And the video I did on Margareta Himmler, I've explained that what happened there, and but that wasn't done by some government. It was done by people looking for souvenirs and things of the like, things which actually many years later became quite valuable. And indeed, in Himmler's case, it would seem that he was actually helped. The looters were helped by the staff who opened things up for them. Himmler didn't keep a diary like Goebbels did. So Goebbels, he came back several times during the day, every day, and he wrote something on it. Himmler was somebody who he wrote notes. Some of them, lots of them appear to be missing. What about things which are held in Russia, for example. Well, yeah, but the thing is, like, the Soviet Union didn't release things deliberately in order for its own political reasons. It didn't. So it wanted to create misinformation. So it didn't do it. Now, undoubtedly, there were very large profiles on Himmler, and I know that some of these things have been released, but there is very little. Now, I know from my own experience in Russia, it's like banging your head against the wall trying to get anything out of them. And I haven't tried since 2009, and I certainly won't be trying again. But having said that, there were things that, for example, when I did a video on the disposal of Hitler's ashes, that information largely came from Russia. So there's nothing. I don't know. There was nothing to hide then, but okay, things are different now. Russia, for its own political reasons, but then again, it wants to create doubt, and it wants to create the conspiracy. Now, there's intercepts and surveillance files, and in Russia probably, but they are not. I'm not aware of any of those which have been released. What else could there be? They could be on the Nuremberg files, yeah, but certainly they would have made lots of notes about provisional documents for Himmler, but then again discontinued once he was dead. Now there's plenty of evidence from people who knew Himmler or survivor testimonies. Some people don't want things to be made public. For example, when I did a video earlier this week on AI identifying confirming the identity, shall I say, of the person who murdered the so-called last Jew in Vinnytsia in Berdichev, the family didn't want to be named. Now, it's not usually not difficult for anybody who has a vague idea of how to do these things to actually do it themselves, but in the whole, I wouldn't do it. I had a case where there was somebody I actually interviewed, and I just wouldn't reveal because it would be just it wouldn't serve any purpose. There was even a case I had recently when I actually said, oh, this was the house where so and so was living, and I thought, well, there are people in there today who probably don't know, so therefore, why do it? So I stood at the end of the street and said, it was in this street that. So these things can happen. Now, one of the biggest things with the conspiracists is, though, they make things up now. These secret files, and which nobody knows where they are, and so that there was a secret British deal with Himmler, that there was suppressed interrogation confessions, that there's evidence of survival and escape, proof of Allied complicity in his suicide. I think the biggest thing is that he survived, he escaped, like the Hitler escaped stories. And so it, the conspiracists make things up to make money. So that's in conclusion, why are some files not available? So the first thing is intelligence protection and its methods. You may think, well, after 80 years plus, then they should have, but they do this for everything. There's administrative retention policies, right? So this is normal. It's a set thing. It's hidden for whatever, 100 years or whatever. It's foreign archive sovereignty. That's the case you'll get in Sweden, for example, the Red Cross, or Russia, and absence through destruction, not suppression. Now, on the case, I just have to say this about documents not being revealed. Now, 3 years ago, I was thinking of doing for a video on the Great Train Robbery for the 60th anniversary. As it turned out, I just did a live talk, and then I spoke off the top of my head. I went to Public Records Office in thinking of this in March of 2023, And there were records which wouldn't be released until, I can't remember, it was 2061 or 2063. I can't remember, it was one of the two. And these now, sorry, 2041 or 2043. Sorry, 2041 or 2043. 78 or 80 years after. And the reason for this, I thought, was utterly clear, because there's some names there mentioned who might have information. Let's suppose that person was born in 1940, it handed information over to the police, and do they really want their name coming out with all the consequences that might have for for them personally? They don't know. The thing I say about the great train robbery is that they're seen as heroes, working class heroes in many films. I saw Buster, the film, earlier this week, which I found quite disgusting. This was an extremely violent thing. Anybody can see from the accounts which are in the Public Records Office. So, I'll come off the point a bit there, but that's why things need to be kept secret. Otherwise, people just wouldn't inform on crime. And in time, there are policies. Maybe these policies now need to be changed. I do accept the fact that something related to Himmler and the Second World War, it does now. It is really, it's gone on a bit too long, and yeah, I can't see personally what benefit there is to actually hide things. But I don't think there was any complicity with anybody in the death of Himmler. Okay, thanks for listening. I did that largely speaking off the top of my head. I've got one or two notes I wrote down in front of me, but you may or may not disagree, or you may or not agree. If you've got evidence, please present evidence. And I don't mean make something up, but please present it, because that way others can have a look at it as well. But for the moment, from me, I'm now in the United Kingdom. Thanks for listening. And now I have to go and do my normal job of work, which has nothing to do with history. Bye for now.